In the mid-2020s, Celeste Mano's life seemed perfect. With a strong family, a job at one of Australia's leading companies, and an ideal romantic relationship, Celeste was in the prime of her life, in the early chapters of a bright and promising story. Unfortunately, not everything was going to be perfect. In the last months of her life, Celeste became prey, the helpless target of a person who would hunt her down to end her life, simply because she had once treated her kindly. Celeste Mano was born on November 11, 1996, in Catania, Italy. The only daughter of her parents, she showed great potential for a successful future from an early age. Her bond with her family was close and loving, and she was known for her cheerful and sensitive personality. When her family decided to move to Melbourne, Australia, Celeste quickly adapted to her new home. During her teenage years, she attended Lalor Secondary College, where she participated as a cheerleader, demonstrating her energy and enthusiasm. After graduating, she decided to pursue her passion for psychology and criminology and enrolled at RMIT University to receive a quality education in these fields. After completing her studies, Celeste joined the customer service department at Serco, a renowned multinational company with a presence in several countries. With her innate ability to connect with people and her leadership skills, she quickly rose through the ranks to become a team leader. During her time at Serco, she had the opportunity to meet Chris Ridsdale, with whom she developed a solid and meaningful romantic relationship. Celeste's life seemed to be at its best, with a thriving career and a stable love life, but her story was about to take an unexpected turn. Sometime in 2019, Celeste met Louis Seiko, a 35-year-old man who joined the team she was leading at the company. Louis was assigned to Celeste's team at the last minute, but in June 2019, he was fired from the company. On Louis' last day of work, Celeste, being a good team leader, offered to walk him out of the building. They talked as they walked, and when they reached the threshold of the exit, Celeste shook his hand and wished him good luck in his future endeavors. However, it seemed that Louis misinterpreted this gesture, which was simply meant to be friendly and empathetic. While shaking her hand, Louis took the opportunity to pull her towards him and kiss her on the cheek. Celeste did not take this gesture well. She felt angry and embarrassed at the audacity of this man, who was practically a stranger to her. But when she told her mother what had happened, her mother made light of the situation. She said that Louis had probably just fallen in love with her without realizing it, and that it would not escalate. But time would show that while her mother was partially right, she was very wrong about another aspect. That same weekend, Celeste received a message on Instagram from Louis. First, the situation seemed normal and posed no immediate danger. Celeste responded kindly to the initial message, simply trying to be polite and courteous. However, Louis did not understand that her response did not imply romantic interest. Louis began sending her long, emotional messages, confessing that he was in love with her, although the true nature of these feelings is questionable. His feelings were obviously intense, but reached a level that Louis himself said was almost unhealthy. He claimed that meeting her had changed his life, that his feelings for her were affecting his performance at his new job, that he couldn't think of anything but her, and that he was on the verge of OCD. Celeste's responses were initially brief, but polite, setting limits without making Louis feel bad. She tried to set clear boundaries without hurting his feelings. For example, she responded that she appreciated his words, but she had only professional feelings for him, and wished him well in his new job and journey. However, Louis refused to accept the rejection and insisted more and more. He seemed not to understand or refused to understand Celeste's reactions and continued his harassment. Unlike Celeste, who was fortunate enough to grow up in very favorable circumstances, Louis Seiko had a much rougher and more difficult start. Born in Iraq in 1984, the eldest of 5 children in a Christian family, Louis Seiko spent his early years under Saddam Hussein's government, which was marked by strong authoritarianism and repression. Years later, Louis and his family were granted humanitarian visas and finally left Iraq for a refugee camp in Australia in 1992. Louis was about 8 years old at the time. His family later moved to Roxburgh Park, a suburb of Melbourne. Despite his somewhat complicated beginnings, Louis Seiko's situation wasn't necessarily desperate. He had lived in Australia for almost 27 years and was part of a large family. But unlike Celeste, who had strong, solid bonds with her loved ones, Louis was quite the opposite. His family described him as a distant person, a loner who rarely interacted with anyone, spent most of his time in his room, and often unemployed, and at 35 years old had never had a romantic relationship or experienced any kind of romantic feelings for anyone. Something changed with Celeste, because after her initial rejection, Louis became determined to pursue her. No matter what Celeste said or did, no matter how many times she turned him down, he kept coming back. It was as if each rejection was just a sign to try again, but that meant nothing because she soon started receiving messages from a new account. That account was blocked, only for another to appear shortly thereafter. The cycle repeated itself over and over. Account suspended, new account created, account suspended, new account created. To make matters worse, the messages became more explicit and vulgar. Celeste was no longer interested in being nice or polite, and her responses were limited to making it clear that she didn't want him to try to contact her again, which, of course, never happened. Finally, tired of this person constantly disturbing her peace, and with her family and loved ones witnessing the effects the harassment was having on her, Celeste, convinced and accompanied by her mother, decided to go to the police. Celeste's desperate situation had become untenable and had been going on for 6 months. However, the officers did not take it too seriously, even though she made it very clear that she had been beginning to feel overwhelmed and desperate about how things were going. The officer who dealt with her simply told them that Louis had committed no crime. He claimed that these were just social media issues that she could always stop using if she didn't like them, and that all she had to do was ignore him. Over the next 6 months, things only got worse. Not only was Louis sending her more messages, but they were becoming more vulgar and offensive. And if that wasn't enough, the man started following her everywhere. More than once, she saw Louis' car parked in front of her workplace. On other occasions, she saw him suspiciously close to places she frequented, and then she began to see him in her neighborhood. Not exactly near her house, since he didn't have her exact address, but in the neighborhood. Eventually, Celeste and her mother went back to the station where they were met by another officer, an officer who, fortunately, was much more professional and serious about his duty. He took the case, took down the stalker's name, and helped them get a restraining order against him, prohibiting him from contacting Celeste by any means. For about a month, the order worked to keep the man away. At first, Louis tried to appeal the order and even tried to take Celeste to court, but all of his requests were denied. However, on August 15, 2020, after several weeks of inactivity, Celeste received a handwritten letter of about 3 pages in which he more or less begged her to lift the restraining order against him. The request suggested some sort of veiled threat. "Celeste, the ball is in your court. Only you can stop this, Celeste. Please stop all this nonsense by withdrawing the order and the charges against me for stalking and harassment. And if you make the right decision, Celeste, we can both move on." Celeste and her mother took the letter and sent it to the police as evidence that Louis had violated the restraining order, which gave authorities the green light to take action and arrest the stalker in late August. Louis' arrest wasn't much of a victory, however. Perhaps in the hope that he'd learned his lesson and would stay away from her for good. It didn't work. After his release, Louis came back with his messages. Only now, it wasn't about convincing Celeste how in love and obsessed he was with her. Now he wanted her to know how angry and outraged he was. The very day he was released, Louis went to the supermarket and bought 2 things, a hammer and a butcher knife. At this point, Celeste was convinced that Louis was out of control and would do something crazy sooner or later. But when she feared for her life the most, the stalker finally disappeared. And not just for a day or 2, but for weeks and months. 3 months to be exact. For a moment, Celeste could finally feel free and at peace. She felt that she could finally get her life back. So much so that on November 14, 2020, less than a week before her birthday, Celeste went on a date with her boyfriend, Chris. Their relationship was entering its best phase. Chris had been one of her main supports in dealing with this hellish last few months. During the date, Celeste and Chris took a picture. Celeste was so pleased with the photo that she told her boyfriend she couldn't wait to share it on social media, a photo that would become her new profile picture. The next day, Celeste posted the photo, the first photo of her with a man since the harassment began. A photo that, unbeknownst to her, sealed her fate, as the stalker was far from going away. Louis hadn't disappeared in the last 3 months. Maybe he'd become more cautious and quiet. Maybe his presence wasn't felt, but he was still lurking, and the photo just stirred something in him. Something dark, sick, and twisted. During those months, Louis dedicated himself to thoroughly studying Celeste's profile, to learn everything he didn't already know about her. First, he made sure to get her exact address by following her home from work and driving through the area repeatedly until the day he saw her car parked in front of her house. He then used Google Maps to get an idea of the layout of the house, and then relied on the photos Celeste had on her profile to figure out which room was hers. On November 16th, Celeste spent the night with her mother watching a movie, and when it got late, went to bed. She was exactly 6 days away from turning 24, and before going to sleep, she had discussed her birthday plans with her mother, which would never happen. That night at 4 a.m., Louis jumped over the wall of the house, sneaked in armed with the same hammer and knife he had bought 3 months ago, used the hammer to break the window of the room, entered, and stabbed her more than 23 times until she was dead. Celeste woke up and fought for her life, but it wasn't enough. Her mother heard the commotion and ran to see what was happening, but by the time she arrived, it was too late. In just 2 minutes and 39 seconds, Louis had entered the home, stabbed Celeste, and fled. However, no one doubted who had done it. Before Celeste's first attempt to report him, and beginning to tire of the denials and rejections from the woman he claimed to love, Louis sent the following message to what would eventually become his victim. "My impression of you has changed. You're no different than most women. I will remember you as a lesson for the rest of my life, and I will use every ounce of energy I have to climb and prove to the world that I am somebody. This is my purpose to you in my last contact with you." It was a message that sent off alarms from this young woman's entire family, alarms that unfortunately were not heeded with due diligence by others. It was clear from the start that Louis's feelings for Celeste, a woman he didn't know at all, were far from anything resembling love. However, one message made it clear that the stalker was a broken person who lacked the strength to deal with her rejection, the emotional strength to empathize with others, and the ability to understand the damage his actions were causing. Immediately after killing Celeste, Louis Seiko surrendered to authorities, not without saying the following words: "You know what happened is your fault. She's dead. She's dead. Go take a look." After being charged with murder, Louis exploited numerous legal loopholes to delay the trial for over 3 years, in addition to using various tactics to feign mental illness and psychological disorders in order to secure a lighter sentence. However, forensic psychiatrist Rajan Darji, who examined the defendant, told the court that during an evaluation, Seiko exaggerated and tried to convince me that he had a defense of mental disability, that the man was completely self-absorbed and egocentric. The killer was sentenced to 36 years in prison as punishment that, in the eyes of the victim's family and many others, seems insufficient for such a horrific and alarming crime. A crime that demonstrates the real danger posed by a person who lacks the inner strength to control his own emotions and impulses. A person who lacks the strength to face his own demons. It's a shame that cases of violence continue to rise around the world. In such a damaged society, these incidents are a cry for help from victims who don't feel safe to leave their homes without being in danger. Ultimately, obsession is a mental disorder with many signs, although they often go unnoticed until it's too late. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for future content. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. I'll see you next time.